The heavy silence at our family dinner table felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. My mother's trembling hands as she served her signature gumbo said more than words ever could. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked through their door in the Garden District, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. I'm Alana, and until that night, I thought I had everything figured out. My Creole restaurant, Magnolia's, had finally started turning a real profit after 3 years of blood, sweat, and endless bowls of seafood étouffée. But family has a way of turning your world upside down when you least expect it. "Julian's in trouble," Dad said, his voice barely above a whisper. He hadn't touched his food, which was the first real warning sign. Big trouble. My younger brother sat at the far end of the table, head bowed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The usual sparkle in his eyes was gone, replaced by something darker, more desperate. "How much?" I asked, already feeling my stomach twist into knots. Mom's spoon clattered against her bowl. 300,000. I choked on my water. "What? How is that even possible?" "The casino," Julian mumbled, still not meeting anyone's eyes. "Then some private games trying to win it back. It got away from me." "Got away from you?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Julian, that's more than just getting away from you. We know it's a lot," Mom cut in, reaching across to pat my hand. "But we figured out a solution." She smiled that smile she always used when she was about to ask for something impossible. "Your restaurant is doing so well now, honey. If you sold it—" "No." The word shot out of my mouth before she could finish. "No way." "Alana, please." Dad leaned forward. "These aren't the kind of people Julian can negotiate with. They've already threatened. So I should give up everything I've worked for because he couldn't control himself?" The words came out harsher than I intended, but the fear and anger were mixing together, making it hard to think straight. Julian finally looked up. "I didn't ask for this, Alana. I didn't want—" "What did you think would happen?" I pushed my chair back, standing up. "Did you think the money would just magically appear?" "We're family," Mom said firmly. "Family helps family. Your father and I have already agreed to remortgage the house, but it's not enough. The restaurant would cover the rest." I looked around at their faces, Mom's desperate pleading, Dad's quiet resignation, Julian's shame. My hands were shaking now, too. "That restaurant isn't just some asset to sell off. It's everything I am. Every recipe I perfected, every late night I worked, every dollar I saved. I built it from nothing." "And you can build another one," Mom insisted. "Julian's life could be in danger." "His life is in danger because of his choices," I said, my voice breaking. "I love you all, but I can't set myself on fire to keep him warm. Not this time." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face crumpled, and Dad looked away. Julian stood up so suddenly his chair fell backward. "Thanks for nothing," he spat, storming out of the dining room. The front door slammed moments later. "I hope you're happy," Mom said, tears streaming down her face. "Your brother needs you, and you're choosing a building over family." "That's not fair," I whispered, but the words felt hollow. "I'll help however I can, but I won't destroy my life to fix his mistakes. Not again." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, pausing only when Dad called my name. "Alana," he said softly, "we're just trying to protect him." "I know, Dad." I turned back one last time. But who's protecting me? The warm New Orleans night air hit me as I stepped outside, carrying the sweet scent of jasmine and the distant sound of jazz from the French Quarter. My phone buzzed, a message from Sasha asking how dinner went. I couldn't bring myself to respond yet. Instead, I drove straight to Magnolia's. The restaurant was closed on Sundays, but I needed to be there, needed to remind myself why I couldn't give in. I unlocked the door and stepped into the dark dining room, running my hand along the smooth wooden tables I'd refinished myself. The kitchen still smelled of today's lunch service, cayenne and garlic, seafood stock, and dark roux. This was my home, my dream, my future. How could they ask me to give it up? My phone buzzed again. This time it was Julian. "You'll regret this." I stared at the message until the screen went dark, then sank into one of the dining chairs. Maybe I would regret it. Maybe I was being selfish. But as I sat there in my empty restaurant, I knew one thing for certain. This was going to change everything. Sleep wasn't coming easy these days. 3 nights after the family dinner, I found myself in Magnolia's kitchen at 4 a.m., stress cooking enough gumbo to feed half of New Orleans. The rhythmic chopping of vegetables usually calmed my nerves, but not today. My phone lit up with another missed call from Mom. That made 17 since Sunday. Girl, you trying to cook your feelings away again? Sasha's voice startled me. She stood in the kitchen doorway, still in her scrubs from the night shift at the hospital. How'd you know I'd be here? Because I know you, she said, dropping her bag on a counter and grabbing an apron. And because your brother's been running his mouth all over Facebook about how his sister's a heartless witch who'd rather see him dead than help family. My knife slipped, nearly taking off a finger. He what? Don't look, it'll only make you mad. She started dicing onions beside me. Though I have to say, some of the comments are pretty interesting, especially the ones from people who've lost money to him before. I can't deal with this right now. I wiped my hands on my apron. I haven't slept properly in days. The lunch service was a disaster yesterday because I couldn't focus, and the back door buzzer interrupted me. Through the security camera, I saw Dad standing there, looking as tired as I felt. You want me to tell him you're busy? Sasha offered. I shook my head and buzzed him in. Dad stepped into the kitchen, the usual warmth in his eyes replaced by worry lines. You're here early, he said, attempting a smile. Couldn't sleep. Me neither. He glanced at Sasha. Mind if I talk to Alana alone for a minute? Sasha squeezed my arm before heading to the dining room, leaving me alone with Dad and my half-chopped vegetables. How's Julian? I asked, more to break the silence than anything else. That's actually why I'm here. Dad leaned against the prep table. Something strange happened last night. The casino, they suddenly dropped half his debt. My hands froze mid-chop. What? How is that possible? They said there were some irregularities in the games he played. Wouldn't give details, but he ran a hand through his gray hair. It's still a lot of money, but not as impossible as before. That's good news, right? It should be. Dad's expression darkened. But Julian's convinced you had something to do with it. Says you must have connections, must have threatened them somehow. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Right, because I have so much pull with casino management between cooking shifts. I know you didn't do anything, Dad said quietly. But Alana, he's spiraling. Your mother's beside herself. We don't know what to do anymore. The morning sun was starting to peek through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the floor. In a few hours, this kitchen would be bustling with prep cooks and servers, but right now it felt like a confessional. I can't fix this for him, Dad. I won't. I'm not asking you to. He straightened up. Maybe you were right. We've been so focused on protecting Julian that we forgot he needs to face consequences sometimes. The knife clattered from my hands onto the cutting board. Did you just say I was right? Don't let it go to your head. A ghost of his old smile appeared. But watching you stand your ground, seeing how you've built all this. He gestured around the kitchen. It made me think about what we're teaching him by always cleaning up his messes. The back door buzzer sounded again. This time it was Ellie, one of my line cooks, arriving early as usual. I let her in, grateful for the interruption, as emotions threatened to overwhelm me. Mr. McGregor, Ellie beamed. Are you staying for breakfast? I was going to try Alana's new beignet recipe. Dad shook his head. Another time, maybe. He turned to leave but paused at the door. Alana, your mother might not say it right now, but we're proud of you. What you've built here, it matters. After he left, Sasha reappeared with 3 cups of coffee. Well, that sounded better than expected. Yeah, I said, still processing, though I can't shake the feeling this isn't over. Of course it isn't, Sasha replied, passing coffees around. But whatever comes next, you've got people in your corner. She pulled out her phone, showing me a local news article. And speaking of corners, you might want to see this. The headline read, Major Gaming Violation Investigation Launches at Royal Palace Casino. Isn't that where Julian lost most of his money? Yep. Sasha grinned. Sometimes karma works in mysterious ways. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Julian. I know what you did. This isn't over. I showed it to Sasha, who rolled her eyes. He really doesn't get it, does he? You didn't do anything except refuse to be his safety net. Maybe that was enough, I said, turning back to my prep work as the kitchen slowly came to life around me. Maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. The lunch rush was just winding down when Julian stormed into Magnolia's. His expensive shirt was wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes matching mine. Customers turned to stare as he marched straight to where I was chatting with a regular at her table. We need to talk, he growled. Now. I plastered on my best professional smile. I'm working, Julian. Make an appointment. Like hell. He grabbed my arm, trying to pull me toward the kitchen. Several customers stood up, and I saw Ellie reaching for the phone at the host station. Let go, I said quietly, or I'm calling the police. He released me but didn't back away. Fine. Let's do this right here then. Tell everyone how you got your friends at the casino to investigate those games. Tell them how you're trying to ruin me. Lower your voice, I hissed, steering him toward my office. Once inside, I shut the door. I don't know what you think I did, but don't lie to me. He slammed his hand on my desk. First, the casino drops half my debt. Then suddenly there's an investigation? That's not a coincidence? You're right, it's not. I crossed my arms. It's called consequences, Julian. Sometimes they actually catch up with you. You smug bit. He caught himself, running his hands through his disheveled hair. You have no idea what you've done. These people, they're not just going to forget about what I owe them. These people wouldn't be a problem if you hadn't gambled away more money than most people make in 5 years. You think I don't know that? His voice cracked. You think I wanted this? I was trying to make things better, trying to win enough to pay off the earlier debts, to make Mom and Dad proud for once instead of you. Instead of me? I laughed incredulously. You think I'm their golden child? I had to fight for every ounce of support for this place. They still think I should have been a teacher like Mom wanted. At least they show up to your success. He slumped against the wall. Nobody comes to celebrate when you're losing. That's because there's nothing to celebrate about destruction, Julian. I softened my tone. Have you considered getting help? Help? He barked out a bitter laugh. The only help I need is paying off these debts before something bad happens. But you're too selfish to... A knock interrupted him. Ellie poked her head in. Everything okay, boss? Table 12 is asking about their check and... She glanced nervously at Julian. I'll be right there. I turned back to my brother. You need to leave. Or what? You'll call the cops on your own brother? If I have to. I held his gaze. I love you, Julian, but I won't let you destroy what I've built. Not today, not ever. He straightened up, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. You know what? Keep your precious restaurant. But when everything falls apart, remember you chose this. After he left, I had to grip my desk to stay standing. Sasha found me there 10 minutes later. Ellie called me, she said, closing the door. You okay? He thinks I'm behind the casino investigation. I showed her the string of threatening texts he'd sent earlier. Like I have that kind of power. Maybe you do, just not the way he thinks. Sasha sat on the edge of my desk. Standing up to him, refusing to enable him, that's its own kind of power. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Another article about the casino investigation, this time mentioning possible connections to illegal private gaming operations. My stomach churned. What if he's right? I whispered. What if something happens to him because I wouldn't help? Stop! Sasha grabbed my shoulders. You're not responsible for his choices. And from what I heard through hospital gossip, that casino investigation was coming for months. Your brother just got caught in the crossfire. A commotion from the dining room drew our attention. We stepped out to find Ellie arguing with 2 men in expensive suits. I told you, she's busy, Ellie was saying, standing her ground despite being half their size. It's okay, Ellie. I approached them. Can I help you? Miss McGregor? The taller one produced a business card. We're from the Gaming Commission. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your brother's activities at certain private gaming establishments. Sasha stepped closer to me as I took the card. She'll answer your questions with her lawyer present. The men exchanged looks. Of course, we'll be in touch. After they left, I turned to find most of my staff and several customers watching. The whispers had already started. Back to work, everyone, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Those lunch specials won't serve themselves. But as I watched my staff scatter, I couldn't shake the feeling that Julian's warning about everything falling apart might be coming true, just not in the way he'd meant it. So, what made you decide to start hiring women from the shelter? Lucas adjusted his recorder on the table between us, his journalist's notepad already half full of scribbled notes. I glanced at Ellie, who was training our newest hire behind the counter. Sometimes the best ideas come from your lowest moments. Meaning? A week ago, my brother came in here demanding I sacrifice everything I'd built to fix his mistakes. I stirred my coffee. It made me think about all the women I've known who gave up their dreams because someone told them family obligation was more important. And that inspired the program? Actually, Ellie inspired it. I waved her over. Tell him how you started here. Ellie wiped her hands on her apron before sitting down. I was living at Grace House Shelter when Alana did a cooking demonstration there. She noticed I kept asking questions about restaurant management, and next thing I knew, she offered me an apprenticeship. Now she's my best line cook and helps manage the training program, I added, watching Ellie's face light up with pride. And you're expanding this initiative? Lucas leaned forward, clearly sensing his story angle. We're partnering with 3 shelters now. 2 training spots per month with guaranteed jobs for those who complete the program. I handed him our new brochure. We're calling it Kitchen Confidence. My phone buzzed. A voicemail notification from Julian. I ignored it. This is fantastic stuff, Lucas said, snapping photos of Ellie demonstrating knife skills to our newest trainee. Mind if I come back during tomorrow's training session? Get some action shots? Before I could answer, Sasha burst through the front door. Turn on the news. Now. I grabbed the remote for the small TV we kept behind the bar. The headline scrolled across the bottom. Local casino investigation reveals connection to major crime organization. Sources say several high-profile gamblers may have been targeted in an elaborate scheme, the reporter was saying. The Gaming Commission is working with federal authorities to identify victims who may have been manipulated into accumulating large debts. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, finally playing Julian's voicemail. Alana. His voice was barely a whisper. You were right. About everything. I need help. Real help. But I don't know how to... God, I've made such a mess. A long pause. I'm going to try to fix things. Not like before. The right way this time. I hope it's not too late. This is bigger than we thought, Sasha said quietly. Lucas was scribbling frantically in his notepad. Does this connect to your brother's situation? I think this interview is over, Sasha cut in, but I held up my hand. No, wait. I took a deep breath. Maybe this is exactly what needs to be talked about. The way addiction tears families apart, how enabling only makes things worse. Boss? Ellie called from the kitchen. The women from Grace House are here for their orientation. I stood up. Lucas, if you want a real story, stick around. See how we're trying to break different kinds of cycles here. The afternoon unfolded in a blur of activity. While I led the orientation, Ellie showed Lucas around, explaining our training methodology. 5 women, each with their own story of survival, sat at my tables looking both nervous and hopeful. This isn't charity, I told them. It's an investment. In you, in this community, in breaking the patterns that keep people stuck. Like your brother? One woman asked softly. Sorry, we saw the news. Yes, I said, surprising myself with my honesty. Exactly like that. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is stop cushioning someone's fall. My phone buzzed again, a text from Dad. Julian's agreed to rehab. Real rehab, not just promises this time. Your mother's crying. I think they're happy tears. Lucas caught me wiping my eyes. Everything okay? Yeah, I smiled. watching Ellie demonstrate how to properly hold a chef's knife to a woman who, until recently, had never dared to dream of a career. Everything's exactly as it should be. Later, after the trainees had left, and Lucas had enough material for what he promised would be a feature story, Sasha helped me close up. "You know," she said, counting out the register, "when you refused to sell this place, I don't think anyone expected it would turn into all this." Me neither. I looked around at the space that had become so much more than just a restaurant. But maybe that's the point. Sometimes standing your ground isn't just about saying no to something. It's about making room for something better to grow. My phone lit up with another text from Julian. "Starting 90-day program tomorrow. Scared as hell. But watching you stand your ground gave me courage. Thank you for not giving up on me by giving in to me." I showed Sasha the message. She smiled, pulling me into a hug. "Now that's what I call karma." "No," I corrected her. "That's what I call hope." "I don't understand why you won't come see him," Mom's voice crackled through my phone's speaker as I prepped for dinner service. "He's doing so well in the program, Alana. He asks about you every time we visit." "I'm not ready," I said, checking the stock simmering on the stove. "It's been 3 weeks, Mom. That's not exactly a lifetime of change." "But he's trying. He's really trying this time." The hurt in her voice made my chest tight. "The therapist says family support is crucial for recovery. Support doesn't mean pretending everything's fine." I turned down the heat under the pot. "I'm glad he's getting help, but I need time." "Time for what? To punish him?" The kitchen door swung open as Sasha walked in with a stack of flyers. "Big problem," she mouthed. "Mom, I have to go. We'll talk later." "Of course," she said bitterly. "The restaurant always comes first." I ended the call before she could say more. "What's wrong?" Sasha handed me a flyer. "These are all over the neighborhood. Someone's trying to shut down our community dinner." The glossy paper showed Magnolia's storefront with text overlaid. "Warning, this business enables criminal activity. Do not support their community programs. They're just a front for money laundering." "What?" My hands shook. "Who would—" "3 guesses," Sasha said grimly, "and the first 2 don't count. Julian's in rehab. He wouldn't— Not Julian. Think about who lost the most when that casino investigation went public." The back door buzzer sounded. Through the security camera, I saw Ellie running toward the entrance, looking panicked. I let her in. "They're outside the shelter," she gasped, catching her breath. "Some guys in suits telling the women not to come to training today, saying they could get in trouble for participating in illegal activities." "That's ridiculous." Sasha pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Lucas. This needs to be exposed." "No," I said, an idea forming. "Call everyone instead. All our graduates, current trainees, their families. Tell them to come here tonight." "For what?" "For dinner." I grabbed my chef's coat. "We're having our community dinner exactly as planned, but this time we're inviting the media." The next few hours were chaos. While I cooked, Sasha worked the phones. Ellie coordinated with the shelter directors. By 6 o'clock, the dining room was packed with familiar faces. Women we'd trained, their children, local supporters who'd seen the flyers and came specifically to show solidarity. Lucas arrived with his camera crew just as 2 men in expensive suits walked in. "Miss McGregor," the taller one smiled coldly, "we're here to discuss some concerns about your operation." "Perfect timing," I said, loud enough for the cameras to hear. "We were just about to serve dinner. Would you like to meet some of our graduates?" "This isn't a social call. We represent certain business interests that lost a lot of money when their illegal gambling operation was exposed." Sasha stepped forward. "Funny how you're targeting us right after that investigation went public." The shorter man's face darkened. "You should be careful making accusations." "Like accusing us of money laundering?" Ellie joined us, several other women standing behind her. "I'd be happy to show the news crew my pay stubs, my certification, my new apartment lease. Would you like to explain to them why helping women escape poverty is suspicious?" Camera lights flashed. The men retreated, but not before Lucas got plenty of footage. "This isn't over," the taller one muttered as they left. "You're right," I called after them. "It's just beginning." Later that night, after the cameras left and the last guests headed home, I found a voicemail from Julian. Saw you on the evening news. His voice sounded clearer than it had in years. Those guys who came to the restaurant? They used to hang around the private games. Bad people, sis, really bad. Be careful, okay? And I'm proud of you. For everything. Sasha found me crying in my office. Hey, no tears allowed. We won tonight. Did we? I wiped my eyes. What if they come back? What if... Then we'll handle it. She sat down beside me. You know what I realized today? When you refused to sell this place, you weren't just saving a restaurant. You were building a fortress. A fortress? Look around. She gestured to the walls covered in photos of our graduates, their success stories pinned alongside recipes and reviews. Every woman you've helped, every life you've changed, they're all part of your armor now. Those guys? They're used to threatening lonely people with everything to lose. But you're not lonely, and you're not afraid. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Saw the news. Your father and I, we understand better now. Why you couldn't give this up. We're sorry. I showed Sasha the message. Maybe some good comes from standing your ground after all. Maybe? She laughed. Girl, you turned a family crisis into a community triumph. I'd say that's more than maybe. Through the office window, I could see Ellie closing up, training our newest hire on the proper shutdown procedures. Tomorrow, we'd do it all again. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. And that made all the difference. And that's how you properly reduce a sauce, I demonstrated to the group of women gathered around the industrial stove. Questions? Just one, Lucas called from the doorway, holding up a newspaper. Have you seen today's front page? The headline read, Federal investigation uncovers multi-state gambling ring, local casino executives arrested. That's why those guys haven't bothered us lately, Sasha said, snatching the paper. They've been busy getting fitted for handcuffs. One of our trainees, Maria, peered at the article. Isn't that the casino where my brother got in trouble? Yeah. I turned back to the stove. Let's focus on cooking. Actually, Lucas stepped further into the kitchen. That's why I'm here. The story's getting national attention. Good Morning America wants to feature kitchen confidence. They're interested in the connection between gambling addiction, family dynamics, and women's empowerment. I nearly dropped my spoon. What? They want to film here next week. Show how you turned a personal crisis into a community solution. Absolutely not. I shook my head. I'm not using my brother's addiction for publicity. Boss, Ellie touched my arm. Maybe you should think about it. Remember what happened when Maria's story went viral? She was right. After our local news segment aired, Maria's video about escaping domestic violence and finding purpose in our kitchen had exploded online. Applications to our program tripled overnight. This isn't about exploiting anyone's struggles, Lucas added. It's about showing people there's hope, that standing up for yourself can create positive change. My phone buzzed, a text from Julian. 60 days sober today. Group leader says I should thank the people who helped me hit bottom, so thank you for not saving me from myself. Alana? Sasha prompted. What are you thinking? Before I could answer, the kitchen door burst open. Dad stood there, looking worried. Have you seen the news? He asked. About the gambling ring? No, about your mother. She's giving interviews. What? I grabbed the phone he held out. There was Mom on the local news, standing outside her church. My daughter's restaurant shows that tough love works. When she refused to enable my son's addiction, it forced our whole family to face hard truths. Now Julian's in recovery, and Magnolia's helps other families break destructive patterns. She's been going to Al-Anon meetings, Dad explained. Learning about codependency, she wanted to make amends in her own way. I handed his phone back, speechless. So, Lucas said after a moment, about that Good Morning America segment? Fine. I wiped my hands on my apron. But on one condition, we focus on the women in the program, their stories, their triumphs. Deal. He grinned. They're going to love Ellie's story especially. My story? Ellie looked startled. From shelter resident to head trainer? That's the American dream right there. Speaking of training, I called everyone's attention back to the stove. These sauces aren't going to learn themselves. Later that evening, after the trainees left, Ellie stayed to help me plan the next day's menu. You know what's funny? She said, writing out prep lists. When I first came here, I thought I was just learning to cook. But really, I was learning to believe in myself. That's exactly what we need to show on camera next week. I started gathering ingredients for tomorrow. Not just the food, but the transformation. Like you? She smiled. You transformed too, you know. Standing up to your family, building all this. The back door buzzer interrupted us. Through the camera, I saw Mom standing there, holding what looked like a pie. I let her in. She stood awkwardly in the kitchen, taking in the prep lists and training schedules covering the walls. I brought pecan pie, she said softly. Your favorite. Mom, about those interviews? I should have asked first. I needed to say it out loud. How wrong we were pushing you to enable Julian. How right you were to stand firm. She set the pie down. I'm proud of you, honey. Not just for the restaurant's success, but for showing me what real strength looks like. Ellie quietly slipped out, leaving us alone. The TV show wants to interview us next week, I said. All of us, including Julian if he's willing. Show how families can heal. He'll do it, Mom smiled. He's different now. We all are. My phone lit up with another text from Julian. Therapist says I should come see the restaurant. See what I almost destroyed. When you're ready, I'd like to apologize in person. I showed Mom the message. Are you ready? She asked. No, I admitted. But maybe that's okay. Maybe being ready isn't as important as being willing to try. Mom pulled me into a hug, and for the first time in months, it felt like home again. Julian looked smaller somehow, standing in Magnolia's dining room after hours. Gone were the expensive clothes and flashy watch, replaced by a simple button-down and jeans. 75 days sober had changed more than just his wardrobe. This place looks different, he said, running his hand along a table edge. More alive. That's because it is. I gestured to the walls, now covered with photos of our graduates and news clippings about kitchen confidence. No more just serving food. Now we serve purpose. I saw the Good Morning America segment. He smiled weakly. You were amazing, Mom too. Even Dad managed not to look too grumpy on camera. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken words. Sasha had offered to stay for this meeting, but I'd insisted on doing it alone. I'm sorry, Julian finally said, his voice cracking. Not just for the gambling or asking you to sell this place. I'm sorry for trying to make you feel guilty for my mistakes, for threatening you, for everything. Sit down, I said, pulling out a chair. I want to show you something. I brought out my laptop, opening a folder of security camera footage. This is from 3 months ago, the night you came in here demanding I sell. Alana, I don't need to. Watch. The footage showed him grabbing my arm, yelling in my face. His expression changed as he watched himself, horror creeping across his features. Now look at this. I switched to footage from earlier today. Ellie teaching a group of women how to plate dishes, their faces bright with pride and possibility. This is what you almost took away. Not just my dream, but theirs too. I was a monster, he whispered. No. I closed the laptop. You were sick. There's a difference. Is there? He looked up, eyes wet. Because from where I'm sitting, I hurt everyone I love. I let Mom and Dad remortgage their house. I tried to guilt you into giving up everything you've built. How is that not monstrous? A monster wouldn't be sitting here now, facing what they did. I reached across the table, taking his trembling hand. A monster wouldn't be doing the work to change. The kitchen door swung open as Ellie backed through it, carrying a tray. Sorry to interrupt, but these need testing before tomorrow's service. She set down 2 plates of bread pudding, our grandmother's recipe, the one comfort food that had always brought our family together. You remembered, Julian said softly. Hard to forget the guy who used to steal all the pecans off the top. Ellie smiled. I'll leave you to it. She seems nice, Julian said after she left. They all do. The women in your program. They're survivors. I pushed a plate toward him. Like you're trying to be. He took a bite, closing his eyes. Tastes like Sunday dinners. Before everything. We can have those again, you know. Different, maybe. Better, hopefully. But we can rebuild. I don't deserve... This isn't about deserving. I cut him off. It's about choosing. Every day, you choose recovery. Every day, these women choose to trust themselves again. Every day, I choose to believe in second chances. Even for me, especially for you. I took a bite of my own pudding. But Julian, if you ever threaten me or this place again, you'll have me arrested, he nodded. I know, and you should. I need consequences to stay straight. That's what my sponsor keeps telling me. My phone buzzed, a message from Mom in our newly created family group chat. Don't forget, family dinner Sunday. Julian's cooking as part of his amends. Heaven help us all. I showed him the message. He actually laughed. A real laugh, not the bitter sound I'd grown used to. I've been practicing, he said. Taking cooking classes at the rehab center. Turns out working with your hands helps with cravings. You know, I hesitated. We could use another instructor for the basic skills classes. Once you've got more solid, clean time, of course. His fork clattered against the plate. You'd trust me to... Not yet, but someday. Maybe. If you keep doing the work. He wiped his eyes with his napkin. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep showing up. Say you'll keep choosing recovery. Say you'll help me prove that rock bottom can be a foundation instead of an ending. I will. He reached for my hand again. I promise, sis. No more destroying things. Only building from here on out. The evening light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the dining room. Tomorrow, these tables would be full of customers, trainees, and hope. But right now, it was just us, a brother and sister sharing bread pudding and possibility. One day at a time, I offered. One day at a time, he agreed. And Alana, thank you for not giving up on me, even when you had every right to. That's what family does, I said. The real kind, anyway. We hold each other accountable, but we also hold on to hope. Ladies and gentlemen, Lucas stood at the podium in Magnolia's packed dining room. Please welcome the newest graduates of Kitchen Confidence. Applause erupted as 6 women, including Maria, stepped forward to receive their certificates. I watched from the kitchen doorway, fighting back tears as Ellie pinned on their official chef's pins. And now, Lucas continued, the founder of Kitchen Confidence would like to say a few words. Alana? I stepped up to the podium, looking out at the familiar faces. Mom and Dad in the front row, beaming, Sasha filming everything on her phone, and Julian, standing quietly in the back, 6 months sober and wearing his volunteer instructor badge. When I first opened Magnolia's, I began. I thought success meant full tables and good reviews. But standing here today, I realize success isn't just about what you build. It's about who you help build themselves up. Maria stepped forward. Alana gave us more than just cooking skills. She showed us how to stand our ground, how to believe in ourselves. Now I'm opening my own catering business, and my daughter finally sees her mama proud and strong. Speaking of business, Lucas interrupted, I believe there's another announcement today? I nodded, pulling out the papers I'd signed this morning. Kitchen Confidence is officially becoming its own nonprofit organization. We'll be expanding to 3 more locations across Louisiana next month. More applause. Mom was openly crying now, Dad holding her hand tight. But we're not done, I continued. Today, we're launching our newest initiative, the Recovery Kitchen Program, and I'd like to introduce its director, Julian? My brother froze, clearly not expecting this. I'd only told him about the position yesterday, and he'd been hesitant to accept. Come on up, I encouraged. He made his way to the podium, hands shaking slightly. When my sister first refused to sell this place to cover my gambling debts, I thought she was being selfish. Now I understand she was being strong, not just for herself, but for everyone who needed to see that standing your ground can change lives. The Recovery Kitchen Program, I explained, will provide culinary training specifically for people in addiction recovery, giving them marketable skills and a supportive community, because everyone deserves a chance to rebuild. Even those who once tried to tear things down, Julian added softly. After the ceremony, as people mingled over plates of Ellie's famous bread pudding, Sasha pulled me aside. "Remember when you thought refusing to sell the restaurant would destroy your family?" she asked. "Seems like another lifetime," I admitted, watching Julian demonstrate knife skills to an interested group of recovery program applicants. "Boss," Maria called from the kitchen, "the health inspector's here for the new location certification." "Go," Sasha laughed. "Build your empire." I headed to the kitchen but paused at the door, taking in the scene. Mom and Dad sampling new recipes with the graduates, Ellie mentoring the next class, Lucas interviewing program participants for another feature story, and Julian finally finding his place in the legacy he'd once tried to destroy. My phone buzzed, a message from one of the casino executives who'd tried to intimidate us, now serving time for racketeering. "Your brother's program? Would it accept referrals from prison rehabilitation services?" "Everything okay?" Julian asked, noticing my expression. I showed him the message. "What do you think? Ready to help change more lives?" "One day at a time," he smiled, echoing our new family motto. "But yeah, I think I am." The health inspector cleared her throat behind us. "Ms. McGregor? Ready for the inspection?" "Actually," I said, "it's Chef McGregor." "And yes, we're ready." As I led her through the kitchen, past the wall of success stories and the training schedules and the dreams taking shape at every station, I realized something profound. Sometimes the biggest victories come not from fighting battles, but from standing firm enough to let others find their strength. "Impressive operation," the inspector noted, reviewing our certification documents. "You've built something special here." "No," I corrected her, watching through the window as another potential trainee walked through our doors, hope written across her face. "We're all building it together." The evening wound down with family dinner, a new tradition where graduates, trainees, family, and staff shared meals and stories. Julian brought out his latest creation, a fusion of our grandmother's recipes and his own recovery journey. "To standing your ground," Sasha raised her glass. "To second chances," Julian added. "To family," Mom and Dad chimed in. "To all of it," I said, looking around at my expanded definition of family. "To every hard choice that led us here, and every new choice waiting ahead. Because that's what life is, really. A series of moments where we choose whether to stand or fall, whether to build or break, whether to give up or grow. And sometimes, if we're lucky, those choices create ripples that help others find their own strength to stand." That's what Magnolia's became. Not just a restaurant, but a reminder that rock bottom can be a foundation. You just have to be brave enough to build on it.
When Matteo discovered that I wouldn't be inheriting any of my father's wealth, his reaction was explosive and immediate. "You mean you get nothing?" he yelled. "Then you're of no use to me. I want a divorce right away." Following our separation, I devised a plan to get back at both my husband and my sister, who surprisingly, quickly married each other after our breakup. I'm Riley, and I am a 27-year-old administrative officer. Matteo and I had been married for 4 years. We met through a family friend who thought marrying into my somewhat affluent family would be beneficial for Matteo. Despite my family's wealth, the concern of who would inherit it was prominent since I and my sister were the only heirs. After my mother's death, my father, Matteo, and I lived together in my parents' house. Matteo seemed genuinely caring towards my father, which made everyone believe he was a good match for me. However, before our wedding, the relative who introduced us gave me a concerning heads-up. "It might seem strange since I introduced Matteo, but he's quite fixated on money, so be cautious." At that point, it was too late to back out, as we were already legally bound and the ceremony was imminent. Initially, I didn't perceive any obsession with money in Matteo's behavior, so I proceeded with the marriage, albeit vigilantly because of what I had been told. While he didn't overtly show a greed for money, his casual inquiries about my father's finances during their conversations hinted at his underlying interest. Another area of unexpected interest for Matteo was my younger sister, who is 5 years my junior. Unlike me, she is vibrant and extroverted, enjoying a lively social life. The stark contrast between her dynamic presence and my more reserved nature caught Mateo's attention from the start. "Your sister really has a different vibe from you, doesn't she, Riley?" he commented once, clearly intrigued by her. This difference between my sister and me stirred mixed emotions within me. Although my family friend had been concerned about my prospects of marriage due to my modest appearance, thinking that the family legacy might be safer with my more attractive sister, the true depth of their worries only became clear to me later on. My father was always more indulgent with my sister, allowing her to pursue her education far beyond high school. After earning her college degree, she wasn't ready to jump into the workforce and decided to attend a vocational school, even though she didn't have a clear career objective in mind. She just seemed to prefer studying over working. On the other hand, my mother was much stricter. She insisted that my sister should start working immediately after college. However, my father had the final say and supported her decision to continue her education at the vocational school. Upon completing her vocational studies, my sister landed a job at a company owned by one of our father's friends. But she left the position after only 3 months, claiming she couldn't show her full potential there. Both my mother and I were perplexed by her rationale, as it seemed unlikely she had grasped every facet of her role in such a short time. Yet, my father took her side again and swiftly arranged another job for her at a different company. Things took a turn when our mother fell ill and was hospitalized. During this time, my sister visited her daily, often missing work. Eventually, she left her job, stating she wanted to focus on caring for our mother. However, her idea of caregiving mainly involved sitting in the same room, chatting occasionally, or being engrossed in her smartphone in the waiting area. In contrast, I found myself managing more practical tasks, like handling our mother's laundry and ensuring she had fresh clothes. While our mother might have appreciated my sister's company initially, her health deteriorated significantly after a month, making conversation difficult. Sadly, within 5 weeks of her condition worsening, she passed away. The shock seemed to paralyze my father and sister, leaving me to organize the funeral arrangements. Thankfully, with the support of our relatives, we managed to honor our mother with a dignified farewell. After our mother's death, my sister moved out to live independently, working part-time. Unable to meet her living expenses, she once again relied on our father, who began covering her rent and utility bills. It seemed that no matter the situation, my father's support for her was unwavering. My sister was using all her earnings from part-time jobs for leisure activities. Whenever she ran out of money, she would turn to our father for financial support. While our mother was strict and had curtailed such dependencies, after her passing, our father became much more lenient, allowing my sister to take as much money as she needed. I initially thought that if both our father and sister were content with this arrangement, there wasn't an issue. However, after I married and moved in with my husband at my parents' house, I discovered that my father wasn't the only one giving her money. My sister had also been approaching my husband for financial help. He found it hard to refuse her requests and even asked her to keep it a secret from me, fearing I might become jealous. My sister's lifestyle, reliant on the funds from our father and my husband, seemed unsustainable, and that proved true when our father fell ill and was hospitalized. Despite our family crisis, my sister didn't visit our father at the hospital. Instead, she began to pressure me for money, claiming she was entitled to continue receiving the financial support our father had provided. "Since I've been getting money from Dad every month, I need you to continue that. The rent and utility bills are still being paid from Dad's account, after all," she said in a demanding tone. This was the first time I heard about the extent of her dependence, and it shocked and angered me. Despite my frustration with her lack of concern for our father's health, I sensed she was struggling. I asked her, "How much are you getting from Dad every month?" And I suggested, "You need to get a job soon and start living on your own earnings." Her response was terse and sullen. "Don't be so annoying," she retorted. This situation highlighted the financial imbalance and dependency issues within our family, and it became clear that something had to change for everyone's sake. My sister proudly declared that she was receiving $1,000 every month from our father, not including her rent. I was taken aback by her audacity and worried that such a hefty sum would discourage her from seeking employment and becoming self-reliant. Initially, I believed our father's hospitalization was temporary and thus saw no harm in continuing his financial support for her. However, his health took a sudden turn for the worse, prompting me to alert our relatives and seek updates from his doctors, who confirmed the gravity of his condition. During this stressful period, I hoped for support from my husband, but he was often too engrossed in his work to visit the hospital. On the rare occasions he did show up, he seemed more interested in discussing potential inheritances than in offering comfort. The inheritance must be substantial, right? Since it's just you and your sister, you'll split it equally, right? He asked insensitively. His fixation on the money rather than my father's health disgusted me, confirming the warnings my relatives had given about his materialistic nature. My sister, too, showed her true colors. When I informed her of our father's critical condition, her only concern was whether she would continue to receive her monthly allowance. "Forget about that, just make sure you pay me every month. Without that money, I can't live," she demanded before abruptly ending the call. Her selfishness infuriated me, especially as I faintly heard a male voice in the background during our conversation, which I distressingly recognized. A month later, our father passed away. Neither my sister nor my husband were present in his final moments. Having organized my mother's funeral previously, I knew the immense responsibility involved. Yet again, I was left to handle everything alone. My sister didn't even attend the funeral, and my husband disappeared immediately after the ceremony, claiming he had work commitments. Even the relative who had introduced me to my husband noticed his absence and commented on it at the funeral, asking, "What happened to your husband? It's strange for him to be absent, isn't it?" All I could muster was a bitter smile, a silent acknowledgement of the painful realization that those closest to me were the most distant when it mattered most. After the emotional whirlwind of my father's funeral, I finally had a moment to breathe. However, the calm was short-lived. My husband approached me with a sly grin, his first words hinting at his true concerns. "So, how much did you inherit? Even if it's split, you must have gotten quite a bit, right?" This was exactly the money-centered mindset my relative had cautioned me about before we married. Disheartened yet unsurprised, I responded with calculated indifference. "My sister gets $250 million, and I get nothing." I hadn't actually discussed the inheritance details with my lawyer yet, and with the funeral barely behind us, I hadn't even begun to process my emotions. But seeing my husband so eagerly talk about the inheritance pushed me beyond frustration to near amusement. His reaction was immediate and dramatic. "What? You don't get anything? Then you're no use to me. Let's get a divorce right now." His words echoed the shallow nature of his commitment. Feeling mutual disdain, I shot back, "Let's do that. It's clear you married me for my father's money, didn't you? I'll divorce you." With that, I pulled out the divorce papers I had preemptively prepared, knowing deep down that our marriage could come to this. My husband was taken aback as I handed him the papers, perhaps surprised at my readiness, but he signed them regardless. As he did, he spitefully remarked, "I'll just divorce you, who has no inheritance, and remarry your sister Victoria to get the $250 million. Regardless of his taunts, I promptly filed the divorce papers. I was relieved to free myself from a marriage that had become nothing more than a financial transaction to him. The very next day, it seemed he had moved on and submitted a marriage certificate with my sister, Victoria. A few days later, still under the delusion of the inheritance tale I spun, he called me, shouting over the phone, clinging to his mistaken beliefs. "When are you going to start the inheritance procedures? Give Victoria the $100 million as soon as possible," my ex-husband demanded over the phone. I had been anticipating his call, eager to see how this would unfold, but I certainly didn't want to be the one to reach out first after he had stormed out. In a composed, businesslike tone, I replied, "Let's discuss it at my place this Sunday. I'll have everything ready for the process." Overjoyed, thinking he was on the brink of receiving a fortune, my ex-husband quickly agreed and hung up, his voice brimming with barely contained excitement. However, the real drama was set to unfold over the weekend. My ex-husband and my sister arrived at my parents' house, visibly surprised to find that I had invited a lawyer to join us. My ex-husband, however, tried to mask his surprise with overconfidence, remarking, "I knew it. You need a lawyer to handle such a large inheritance." The lawyer, maintaining a professional demeanor, but with a hint of confusion, addressed my ex-husband, "While there is indeed the matter of inheritance to discuss, there's also a matter of property division claimed by your ex-wife against you." He then presented several photographs of my ex-husband leaving my sister's house, each stamped with a date clearly showing they were taken before our divorce was finalized. "These photographs are evidence of your affair before the divorce proceedings were completed. You will need to comply with the division of property as outlined by these findings," the lawyer explained. Unbeknownst to them, I had overheard my ex-husband discussing the inheritance over the phone with my sister during my father's funeral preparations. Sensing their belief that I was too preoccupied with grief to notice their actions, they had been careless. Their meetings at my sister's house, which they thought were secret, were now coming to light, and I had directed my lawyer to gather evidence of my husband's infidelity. As the truth dawned on my ex-husband and the reality of the situation began to sink in, I watched, a mix of satisfaction and sadness coloring the moment. The inheritance he had so greedily anticipated was entangled in legal stipulations he hadn't foreseen, and his deceit was now laid bare for all to see. At my sister's house nearly every day, my ex-husband's frequent visits provided ample evidence of their affair. Both were visibly shocked when the conversation abruptly shifted from inheritance to their infidelity during the meeting with the lawyer. However, my ex-husband quickly composed himself and dismissively said, "Property division is trivial compared to the $250 million I'm about to inherit. I'll settle that immediately." With arrogance, he signed the documents the lawyer presented, without fully understanding the situation. After he signed, I couldn't help but add, "Enjoy your life with my sister, who, by the way, inherited nothing. Now that you've signed, I'll be sure to enforce the property division agreement." At this revelation, my sister let out a scream of disbelief. "What? Why is my inheritance zero? I'm supposed to get $250 million. My ex-husband, his face turning red with anger and confusion, blurted out, "There's no way. There's no inheritance. I won't let you keep it all." The lawyer, maintaining his calm amidst their outbursts, began to clarify, Victoria was actually her late mother's child from a previous relationship, and was never officially adopted by Riley's late father. There is no legal parent-child relationship between them, and thus, Victoria, you are not eligible to inherit from Riley's father. I added, trying to help my sister understand the family history she might not remember. "When our parents remarried, Victoria, you were only about a year old, so it's unlikely you'd recall any of it. I was 4 and vividly remember the joy of gaining a sister. What I never anticipated was that this sister would one day betray me." I continued, "Our father and mother were each bringing a child into the marriage and tried to balance their affection between us. My mother treated me as her own daughter, and my father cherished my sister, perhaps even more so because she wasn't his biological child and he felt the need to compensate. It's also important to note," I explained further, "that although they remarried, my mother, suspected by some relatives of being after my father's assets, chose not to officially adopt Victoria. This was the complex family dynamic that those who suggested my marriage were well aware of." This revelation shook the very foundation of what my sister and ex-husband believed they were entitled to, exposing the complex layers of our family's past and the misaligned expectations that led to this dramatic confrontation. As it turned out, I was the sole person eligible to inherit my father's estate. If my parents had shared biological children, the inheritance might have been more complex. But, as fate would have it, they had none. Sometimes I think they chose not to have children together to sidestep potential disputes over inheritance. This realization hit me only recently, when I understood why my father had been financially supporting my sister even into her adulthood. Similarly, I was never legally adopted by my mother, meaning we weren't recognized as parent and child by law. However, this technicality never mattered to us. We were family in every sense that counted. It became apparent that our parents had not disclosed to my sister that they had both been remarried previously. Today, she was faced with this truth for the first time. Watching my ex-husband's reaction was telling. His face shifted from red to pale, as he grasped not only the absence of the expected inheritance, but also the implications of the property division he had agreed to. Looking bewildered, he asked me, "Was that story about Victoria getting 100 million, and you getting nothing just a lie?" Barely suppressing a chuckle, I replied, "Of course, it was a lie. It was my way of getting back at you for your affair. And no, my father's estate isn't worth $100 million. Just then, my sister, who had been quiet, burst out, "I've done quite a lot of shopping expecting that I would get Dad's inheritance. What's going to happen to the money Dad had been giving me? Will you continue supporting me, sis? Since you're married and have a reliable husband, you don't need it anymore, right? Have Mateo support you." She looked towards my ex-husband, who was still pale from the shock. Shaking his head, he confessed, "I can't afford that. I also made purchases expecting the inheritance, and now with the property division, I'm financially stretched too thin." The revelation and the subsequent fallout had left everyone reeling. My sister and ex-husband, both misguided in their expectations, now faced the reality of their financial situations without the safety net they had presumed would be there. The dynamics of our relationships had fundamentally shifted, underscored by the stark truths that were only now coming to light. After that dramatic declaration, my husband suddenly dropped to his knees in front of me, his expression filled with remorse. "Riley, I'm sorry, it was all my fault," he pleaded. "I apologize. Can we possibly get back together?" The lawyer, who had been packing up his briefcase, couldn't help but chuckle at the scene. "Where did that arrogant attitude go?" he murmured, amused by the drastic change from the man's earlier demeanor. Mateo, now humbled and kneeling, looked utterly ridiculous. Following our intense discussion, my ex-husband and my sister left the house looking thoroughly dejected. It wasn't long before I heard they had divorced. For my ex-husband, who had remarried hastily with the hope of inheriting through my sister, his interest dwindled once it was clear she had no inheritance. He lamented about the upcoming property division and his inability to support my sister financially. Given that my ex-husband possessed no significant assets, I arranged with my lawyer to have the court-mandated payments deducted directly from his monthly salary. My lawyer assured me this was the best way to ensure I received what was owed without delay. My sister, once supported by our father, now found herself working part-time just to make ends meet. Unfortunately, her financial burdens became too great, and she eventually filed for bankruptcy. Soon after, she moved out of her apartment, and I lost track of her whereabouts. It was a sad realization that my father's financial support, while well-intentioned, had inadvertently left her ill-prepared to handle life's financial realities. As I settled back into life in my parents' house alone, some relatives suggested they could introduce me to potential suitors. However, I declined their offers. The experience with my ex-husband had taught me a valuable lesson. This time, I resolved to find a partner on my own terms, someone whose values aligned more closely with my own, without the interference of well-meaning, but ultimately misguided matchmaking. After my husband bluntly told me he wanted a divorce, he stormed out, leaving me alone with our 3-year-old twin girls and our newborn daughter. I had suspected for a while that he was unfaithful, yet between juggling childcare and work, I never found the strength to address it. As I was reaching my breaking point, one of the twins embraced me and whispered, "Mommy, we love you." Their innocent, worried faces looked up at me, and despite my anger toward my husband, a profound realization hit me. I needed to end this for our sake. Resolute, I quickly finalized the divorce papers. With a knowing smirk, I understood that he was unaware of the chaos he was spiraling into. His routine excuses of coming home late had worn thin. "My name is Addison, I'm 29, and we had married 4 years prior when he was slightly younger. Initially, I indulged him, perhaps too much. We had our twin girls the following year, and another daughter 3 years later. His habit of returning home late began worsening after our last child was born. During the pregnancy, he had hoped for a boy, dreaming of playing catch with his son. However, when another girl was born, his disappointment was palpable. At the hospital, upon seeing our daughter, he grimaced and remarked, "She doesn't look like me, she's not cute," igniting a fierce anger within me. How could he not see the beauty in his own child? It seemed he might have already been contemplating divorce by then. Even after we returned from the hospital, his indifference persisted. He scarcely assisted with child care, and when I implored him to at least spend some time with the children or consider hiring help since we had the means, he brushed it off. I was the tire technician, working at a top tire company and earning well above average, while he struggled to maintain steady employment, often leaving jobs before I even realized. Perhaps he felt overshadowed by my career success. At that time, he was also engaged in temporary work, with uncertain prospects. I didn't expect financial support from him, but I hoped he would embrace his role as a father. "Spend some time with the kids at night, at least," I pleaded. But his effort was minimal and clearly unenthusiastic, leaving our daughters disinterested and me disheartened. It was evident he had begun to detach, not just from our relationship, but from his responsibilities as a father. His disengagement with our children, who didn't quite warm up to him, spiraled into a distressing cycle of neglect. One day, he stopped participating in child care altogether. "I'm tired from work, let me rest on the weekends," he declared, spending his days off secluded in his room or out with friends. During holidays, he would leave me with the kids under the guise of work commitments, claiming he had plans and couldn't stay. This forced me to often scramble for a last-minute babysitter, a situation I knew could eventually unravel our marriage and harm our children. Feeling the weight of our deteriorating relationship, I resolved to discuss the matter with my in-laws the following day. However, my concerns were dismissed with a wave of traditional expectations. "That's just how husbands are. A wife needs to be patient," they advised, before shifting the conversation to ask for favors. Isolated, with my parents living far away and difficult to reach, I felt increasingly alone. Returning home one evening, I found my husband lounging in pajamas amidst the chaos of our untidy home, the kids listlessly playing with their toys. Their faces lit up when they saw me. "Where have you been all this time?" he asked nonchalantly. "I had to stop by the in-laws for a bit." "Can you start on dinner?" "I'm starving." "If you've been home all day, couldn't you at least do some laundry or clean the bathroom?" At my inquiry, he scoffed in amusement. The nerve to demand gratitude when his contributions were minimal. "What do you mean? I cleaned the bathroom yesterday, and you didn't thank me." I could barely recall a thanks that slipped from his lips. He then stretched out his hand, asking for money as if it were a joke. "What are you talking about?" I retorted, pulling him aside to the bathroom to avoid our children overhearing our growing argument. "I am working, doing the chores, raising the kids, all of it, and you've never lifted a finger to help. If that's a wife's job, then what's yours?" I challenged. His contribution to our finances was meager, barely $2,000 a month, and he did nothing around the house. Our heated exchange lasted nearly an hour, only interrupted when our daughter's voice broke through, "Mommy, I'm hungry." Her words snapped me back to the grim reality of our failing partnership. Amidst the palpable tension at home, my husband stormed out after our argument, leaving me to hurriedly prepare dinner. During these strained times, a disturbing truth surfaced: my husband was having an affair. I shared this revelation with a former college friend who had gone through a similar ordeal due to her husband's infidelities. She urged me to start gathering evidence. In truth, I had sensed my husband's infidelity long before our youngest daughter's birth. He'd come home bearing the scent of unfamiliar perfume. When I casually inquired about it one evening, he became visibly nervous, breaking into a sweat and stuttering over his words. His late returns, diminishing communication, colder demeanor towards our children, and a noticeable decline in our intimacy were all glaring signs. But the undeniable confirmation came unexpectedly: a trace of lipstick found in his jacket pocket, which he clumsily dismissed as belonging to his mother or as something he used for chapped lips. One day, as he rushed for a bath, removing his shirt along the way, I spotted a hickey, a mark typically hidden by clothing. I almost confronted him right then, but decided it was wiser to collect more evidence. I feigned ignorance with a sweet smile, pretending I hadn't seen a thing. The following day, after a late work shift, I returned home to a quiet house. Our daughters were already asleep. Only the dining room light cast a glow where my husband stood, a stack of papers in his hand. "I can't take this anymore. Let's get a divorce," he declared abruptly, thrusting the divorce papers at me before I could respond. He left swiftly, and the sound of the door shutting stirred our twins from sleep. They looked up at me with concern. "It's okay, sorry for waking you," I whispered, though it was far from okay. "He's reached his limit." "That's my line," I thought bitterly, confused and hurt by his abrupt decision to not only leave, but to abandon his children. My emotions overwhelmed me, and tears began to stream down my face unnoticed. Sensing the shift in the atmosphere, the girls spoke up. "Mommy, we love you," they said, embracing me tightly. Their simple words and sincere hugs were small comforts in the storm of betrayal and upheaval that enveloped our lives. At that moment, clarity washed over me. I realized I couldn't continue living this way, not just for my own sake, but for our little girls who were watching every move, absorbing every tension. I knew as long as I had my children, joy wasn't out of reach. "Well, I'll just file it," I declared, the determination clear on my face. My daughter, sensing the change, offered a hopeful smile, and that night, for the first time in a long while, we all slept peacefully. The very next morning, I acted on my decision and filed the divorce papers first thing. I made a phone call to a contact I had in mind for situations like this, someone who could take immediate action. As I explained the situation, the person on the other end agreed to proceed. This was a contingency I had prepared for, knowing that if my husband ever betrayed us, I wouldn't hesitate to end things and let the consequences fall on him, however dire. 3 days later, as I returned from work, I was greeted unexpectedly by my in-laws and my husband at the front door. My mother-in-law looked livid, my father-in-law appeared visibly shaken, and my husband seemed utterly confused, unaware of the gravity of the situation. "Have you been waiting outside this whole time?" "That's a bit unsettling," I remarked, though the mood was far too serious for light comments. Without a word, my mother-in-law thrust a letter into my hands. It was from my lawyer. "I can see that much," I replied as she began to raise her voice, her face flushing a deep red. "I need to pick up my daughters, so if you'll excuse me," I said, brushing past them, but they followed me into the living room, demanding an explanation. "Why would you do this so suddenly?" "I don't understand," she exclaimed. "If you took the time to read the letter, you might," I responded, trying to maintain my composure amidst her accusations of cowardice and using a lawyer. Just then, my husband, who had been silent, finally spoke up, confused. "Are you upset because I filed for divorce? Is this some kind of complaint?" His words left my in-laws dumbfounded. "You didn't know about the divorce," his mother scolded him, her anger mixed with bewilderment. "Wait, what's happening here?" he stuttered, clueless as ever. The conversation spiraled into chaos, with my in-laws accusing me of ruining everything without understanding the full extent of their son's failings. As they argued amongst themselves, it became clear they had no idea of the struggles and sacrifices I had been making all along. As their voices grew louder, discussing what they thought had happened, I realized how far apart our worlds had become, and how necessary it was for me to move on, not just for my sake, but for our daughters' futures. I watched with detached coolness as my mother-in-law slammed her hand on the table, her frustration palpable. "Why did you divorce Addison?" she demanded. My husband, as usual, clammed up under the pressure. Since he wasn't saying anything, I took it upon myself to explain. "He failed completely in his duties as a husband and father," I stated flatly. "There you go again," she retorted, exasperated. "I told you, that's just how men are. And would you forgive your husband if he had an affair?" I countered, turning the conversation sharply. She froze, clearly not prepared to consider her son unfaithful. My husband tried to cut in, but a stern look from me silenced him. Then, oddly enough, my father-in-law jumped in to defend him. "A man's affair is just a fling, it's not a real problem," he argued dismissively. "This is pointless. Please leave. All further communication will need to go through my lawyer," I declared, signaling an end to this unproductive discussion. "But what are you talking to a lawyer for? You're agreeing to the divorce, right?" my husband asked, confused and clueless about the proceedings. "I filed for divorce straight away. That's what all this is about," I clarified, growing tired of the circular argument. Amidst the chaos, my mother-in-law suddenly burst into tears, shouting, "Paying $777,000 in one lump sum is impossible. What large sum? What are you talking about? Who's paying whom?" I demanded, seizing the moment to reveal a painful secret I had held back until now. It all started right after we got married 4 years ago. I was summoned to my in-laws' house alone for a serious discussion. Nervous, given that she was my husband's mother, I was prepared to help however I could, but nothing could have prepared me for her next words. "I need $75,000, she blurted out unexpectedly, leaving me utterly stunned. As I hesitated, she pressed on about my salary. Unable to resist her pressure, I admitted it was over $200,000 annually, which seemed to spark a gleam in her eye. It turned out my father-in-law had gotten deeply into horse racing, accruing substantial losses and debts. Desperate for $75,000 to cover these debts, she pleaded with me to lend them the money. I felt compelled to help, repeatedly insisting she must pay me back. 4 years passed, and all I received was a paltry $5,000. There were times when she made small repayments only to borrow again soon after. The financial strain and deceit were too much to bear on top of everything else. As I laid out these truths, the room fell silent, the gravity of the deceit and manipulation finally settling in. I realized that I would likely never see the full amount owed, so I decided to take decisive action. I hired a lawyer and filed a claim for the entire remaining balance of $77,000. My husband's reaction was one of shock, his jaw dropping in disbelief. "But we said we'd pay back little by little." "Why all at once?" he stammered. "We are no longer family, so I see no reason to extend any courtesies," I responded firmly, feeling that it was time to assert my boundaries. At this, my mother-in-law erupted, her screech sharp and startling, her anger now directed at my husband. "It's your fault for cheating. You should be the one to pay it back. Why should I? We are not working, and our pension won't cover it," he retorted, clearly overwhelmed by the financial demands and his current unemployment. "If you want to stay in your parents' house, you'll do what I say," she countered angrily. He had no feasible way to pay back $77,000 all at once, especially given his employment situation. "I'll just live at James's place, so I won't pay," he declared, revealing the name of his affair partner in the process. As the family dispute escalated into absurdity, I decided it was time to lay down the final card. Don't think it ends with $77,000. I'm demanding $410,000 each from you and your affair partner, as compensation, and child support, of course. What? Where's the proof I cheated? He blurted out, apparently having forgotten his own admissions. Exhaling a weary sigh, I handed him a stack of photos I had prepared for this moment. The photos, pulled from his social media accounts, clearly showed him kissing and embracing his affair partner, a definite breach of our marriage, as confirmed by my lawyer. Why do you have these? He asked, stunned. A quick online search of your social media. It's surprising you thought it wouldn't be found, I replied. My naive husband had continued posting cheerful photos in a public setting, oblivious to the implications. His lack of savvy with technology, while surprising given his mechanical ineptitude, had made it easier for me to gather the necessary evidence of his infidelity. Even my in-laws stood there, dumbfounded, staring at him in shock. Please leave now. It's time for you to go, I said firmly, signaling the end of the discussion. At least don't demand compensation from James. What if she runs away? My husband pleaded, desperate for some leniency. That's not my problem, I replied coldly. With no resolution in sight and their pleas becoming increasingly desperate, I forcefully ushered the family out. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions, away from my home and my life. Unaware of the financial turmoil that awaited, I could hear my husband's protests through the door as I firmly stood my ground. Call the police, I shouted, and with that, the trio reluctantly departed. Since that tumultuous day, a whole year has elapsed. The woman involved in the affair, after settling the compensation, vanished. This left my ex-husband with no choice but to return to his parents' house, where they incessantly pressured him to address the outstanding $77,000 debt. Desperate, he turned to dubious lenders to cover this amount, and although he managed to settle that particular debt quickly, he was still burdened with $410,000 in damages from the affair, and an ongoing obligation of $780 a month for child support. Now, my ex-husband spends his days engaged in manual labor from dawn until dusk. The mounting interest on his massive debt looms over him, suggesting it might never be fully repaid in his lifetime. However, these concerns are no longer mine to bear. Mommy, we are going to be late. Oops, my thoughts are interrupted by the cheerful voices of my daughters, calling me to take them to daycare. They are growing up healthy and strong, a testament to the resilience and new beginnings we've found. Their joy and well-being are the only happiness I need now, a stark contrast to the life I once shared with their father. From my earliest memories, I recall images washed in a melancholic blue. My father was like a figure in an old, faded photo tucked away in a dusty album, leaving us before I turned F4. My mother, Harper, turned into a tempest, her presence looming over our small apartment. One moment she'd be fervently cleaning the kitchen floor, murmuring about new beginnings, and the next, she'd envelop me in a tight embrace that left me gasping for air. Though these overwhelming hugs were rare, they were the bits of affection I yearned for. Most of the time, I was just a quiet shadow following her around, as she moved hastily, her face marked by constant worry that seemed to consume her. Sometimes, when her worry lines deepened and her expression grew tense, she would leave me with Mrs. Rodriguez downstairs. When Mom returned, a palpable tension would fill the room, like static electricity. She would absent-mindedly tousle my hair with a sigh, a gesture that felt more like an obligation than love. Occasionally, a brief smile would cross her face, offering a fleeting glimpse of the warmth I so desperately sought. Mom eventually started dating again. Angel, a man with laughter lines at the corners of his eyes, came into our lives. Unlike Mom's whirlwind energy, he moved with a gentle calmness and treated me with a kindness that was unfamiliar in our tense home. After a particularly tough day at school, thanks to Andrew and her clique, I found solace in Angel's presence on the couch, my tears blurring my vision. Why do they always pick on me? I mumbled into his shirt, the familiar ache of loneliness tightening around my chest. Kneeling before me, Angel looked into my eyes with a concern I wasn't accustomed to seeing from adults. "They pick on you because they are insecure," he said softly, brushing away a tear. "They feel powerful by making others feel small." His comforting words were a balm to my spirit, sparking a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, things were improving. But in my world, hope was a fragile butterfly, easily crushed. Then Aurora arrived, a tiny bundle of joy with eyes mirroring Mom's. Suddenly, I was no longer the center of attention. All the warmth and affection seemed to vanish, replaced by a chilly indifference as Mom shifted her focus entirely to Aurora, leaving me to navigate the perplexing paths of childhood alone. At 14, with awkward braces, a permanent frizzy halo around my head, and a knot of insecurity as big as Texas in my stomach, I faced new challenges. My mom's negativity towards me flourished like an overgrown garden of weeds. On school picture day, Mom took the day off to perfect Aurora's pigtails and choose her sparkiest dress. When it was my turn, she sighed and rummaged through my closet, muttering, "Nothing decent in here." Of course, on picture day, Aurora shone like a little princess, and I stood beside her looking like a rumpled dandelion compared to her radiant sunflower. Mom cooed over Aurora's photo while mine received just a quick glance and a dismissive grunt. Angel, bless his heart, always tried to bring a positive note, reminding me that I was just as special. Despite the challenges, his gentle reassurance helped me hold onto a sliver of hope in the shifting sands of family life. Angel often took me shopping, helping me find clothes that not only fit well, but also looked great on me. On one challenging day, after a tense encounter with Mom, I instinctively sought solace in Angel's arms, inadvertently calling him Dad. He stiffened, and a look of hurt flashed across his face. At that moment, Mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes ablaze with fury. "You have one father, Ava," she spat, her voice dripping with poison. "And trust me, he deserves you." Her harsh words felt like a physical blow. Feeling the tension spike, Angel awkwardly tousled my hair. "It's okay," he muttered. I couldn't hold back my tears. "It's not okay," I sobbed. From the corner, Aurora, who had been watching with a self-satisfied grin, suddenly interjected, "Ava's been bad again, Daddy." She took my candy without asking. At 18, navigating the world of first crushes and awkward school dances was complicated by a constant anxiety that churned in my stomach. Dating was like navigating a minefield because Mom seemed determined to sabotage any potential relationships before they could even begin. Consider Mark, for instance, a tall, humorous guy with a disarming smile, the kind every teenage girl fantasizes about. After weeks of anxious texts and shy looks, I finally mustered the courage to ask him out. He said yes, and I was elated, but my joy was quickly overshadowed by dread at the prospect of him meeting Mom. The evening of our date, Mom was overly attentive to Aurora, elongating her bedtime story to delay meeting Mark. When he arrived, nervous but sweet, Mom met him with a forced smile. "Ava never cleans her room," she declared offhandedly, as if it were merely a remark about the weather. "You might find socks and pizza boxes under that mountain of clothes." Embarrassment scorched my cheeks. Mark chuckled nervously, but the awkwardness that followed stretched out painfully. The rest of the night was a series of disasters, with Mom making cutting remarks about my weight, my music preferences, and even my college choices. By the end of it, Mark couldn't escape fast enough, leaving me feeling utterly deflated. This pattern repeated with a few unlucky guys over time. Every time I introduced someone new, Mom transformed into a maestro of subtle insults and backhanded compliments, crushing my self-confidence, and extinguishing any chance of a relationship faster than a doused sparkler. At 20, amidst college applications and anxious farewells, I was determined to escape the oppressive atmosphere of my childhood. Senior year was like a command center for a meticulously planned escape to a world where Mom's negativity couldn't reach me. College applications were my artillery. I devoted hours at the kitchen table, pouring my dreams into those applications. Each acceptance letter felt like a small victory, a sliver of hope chipping away at the barriers Mom had erected around me. Of course, she didn't make it easy. When I announced my acceptance to a distant university, she responded with passive-aggressive mastery. "Oh, Ava," she sighed, shaking her head, "so far away. How will we ever see each other?" Her words were heavy with guilt, but I was no longer susceptible to her manipulations. I was ready to move on, unshackled by the past. "We can video chat, Mom," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Besides, there are these things called airplanes." Angel, my ever-supportive anchor, was thrilled for me. "This is amazing, Ava," he beamed, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you." His words felt like a warm embrace on a chilly day. He might not have been my dad by blood, but he was more of a father to me than the man who had left us all those years ago. College was an eye-opener. Surrounded by people who knew nothing of my family drama, I felt like I could finally take a deep breath. I thrived, diving into a sea of new experiences, pushing myself academically, and building friendships that were both genuine and supportive. At 25, adulthood meant endless spreadsheets and a tiny apartment that felt like a castle compared to the cramped bedroom of my childhood. Life was mostly good. My job as an economic consultant kept my mind active, and Silas, my wonderful boyfriend of the past few years, brought a sense of warmth and laughter into my life that I had never known before. One evening, over takeout Thai food and a bottle of wine, Silas looked at me with his adorable goofy grin and dropped a significant suggestion. "I think it's time we met each other's parents," he said. My stomach flipped. Meeting Silas's parents was simple, almost effortless. They lived in a cozy house with a backyard fragrant with freshly cut grass, and they welcomed me with open arms. His mom, Mila, enveloped me in hugs, while his dad, Ethan, spent the night cracking jokes, making me laugh until I cried. They were warm, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. It felt normal, a term I never thought I'd apply to family dinners. But the idea of Silas meeting my own, well, interesting family filled me with dread. How could I explain the years of emotional coldness, the constant jabs, the overwhelming negativity? I confessed everything to him, the fights, the tears, and how my mom had eroded my self-esteem for years. Aurora, now an expert manipulator, hadn't improved with age. Silas listened patiently, his hand resting reassuringly on mine. "Ava," he said firmly, "I'm marrying you, not your family. They may come with baggage, but you are the prize." His words were a balm to my soul, a declaration of love that erased years of self-doubt. Maybe, just maybe, I could build my own happy family, one filled with love, acceptance, and laughter, the kind of family I never had but always deserved. With my stomach in knots, I dialed Angel's number, preparing to break the news about Silas and our engagement. "Hey Ava, what's up?" Angel's familiar voice came through the phone, cheerful as ever. "Hey Angel," I started, taking a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you." I spilled everything, about Silas, the proposal, and the upcoming wedding. A pause hung in the air, then Angel's genuine laughter filled the silence. "Ava, that's fantastic. I'm so happy for you both." His enthusiastic support washed over me like a refreshing wave, reinforcing the newfound peace and excitement about my future. A gentle warmth washed away some of my anxiety as Angel chimed in with encouragement. "You've got to bring him over for dinner, let me meet the man who finally won your heart." Silas, with his supportive nature, was keen on the idea, so a few weeks later, we found ourselves driving to the house where I grew up, a place filled with both fond memories and a sense of dread. Mom greeted us at the door, her expression shifting to a surprised smile. "Ava, you came to visit. And who is this handsome fellow?" "Mom, this is Silas, my fiancé," I said, offering a forced smile. Silas stepped forward, extending his hand warmly. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Turner." Mom beamed, shaking his hand with a bit too much vigor. The pleasure's all mine, dear. So, Silas, what do you do for a living? Silas, unaware of the loaded nature of her question, dove into an enthusiastic explanation of his role as a director of engineering at a prominent company. Angel, always smooth and sociable, injected jokes and anecdotes, keeping the atmosphere light and the conversation moving. Aurora, not one to be overshadowed, spent the dinner batting her eyelashes at Silas, constantly interrupting our conversation to quiz him about his work and hobbies. Meanwhile, Mom doted on every word Aurora said, a stark contrast to the subtle jabs she directed at me. Ava, honey, she'd coo sweetly, her voice dripping with insincerity, you really should take some fashion tips from Aurora. That dress you're wearing, well, it's not exactly flattering. Silas seemed to miss the undercurrents of the conversation, but I was painfully aware of Mom's tactics. She was subtly undermining me, making me feel insecure right in front of my fiancé. The entire evening felt like a twisted performance, where I was continuously reminded that I wasn't good enough, not pretty enough, not successful enough. By the time dessert was served, I was ready to flee. As soon as it was polite, we made our excuses and left. Once safely in the car, Silas let out a long sigh. Your mom, she's quite a character, isn't she? He remarked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Yeah, I muttered, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. She can be. He squeezed my hand gently. But hey, we made it through dinner, right? He was right, we had survived, and despite Mom's negativity lingering like a bad odor, simply holding Silas's hand filled me with a renewed sense of strength and determination. This was my future, a future I was determined to build with him, not tethered to my dysfunctional family. The warm glow of post-dinner satisfaction still hung in the air as Silas and I settled on the couch later, dreaming up our wedding day. We envisioned a small, intimate ceremony in a picturesque vineyard, surrounded by those who genuinely loved and supported us. It was perfect. Then, the next morning, that dream seemed to shatter. My phone buzzed ominously with Silas's name, the cheerful tone now a foreboding ring. Ava, his voice tight with a mix of anger and disbelief, we have a problem. My heart sank. What's wrong? Taking a deep breath, he replied, your mom. My face went pale. What did she do this time? Silas explained, his words landing like blows. My ever-manipulative mother had somehow found his work number, and, instead of offering congratulations, launched into a tirade so vicious it was startling. In her twisted view, I was a paragon of inadequacy, ugly, dull, lacking in social graces. She didn't stop there, she even brought up my father's abandonment, as if it were a weapon. And the final blow? She suggested Silas leave me for Aurora, proclaiming that my younger sister was the true epitome of beauty and charm. Anger surged within me, a fiery, venomous rage. How dare she try to ruin my happiness again? Silas, bless his heart, was furious too, but he channeled his anger into devising a bold, almost reckless plan. We expose her, he said, his jaw set firmly. We set a trap. The plan was deceptively simple. Silas would call Mom, pretend to be persuaded by her scheming, and set up a meeting to discuss her absurd proposal. His aim was to secretly record the entire conversation on his phone. With a calm and convincing tone, Silas made the call. Mom, completely unaware of the trap being set, readily agreed to meet him for coffee. A nervous chuckle escaped me. This was it, Operation Momzilla Takedown was in motion. The outcome was uncertain, but one thing was clear, I was done letting my mother control my future. It was time to turn the tables, and I was all in. I decided to attend their meeting, the idea of confronting Mom, even disguised, sending shivers down my spine. But the anger bubbling inside me, fueled by her relentless negativity and her attempts to sabotage my happiness, drove me forward. Dressed in comfy jeans and a worn-out t-shirt, I slipped into a corner booth at a bustling cafe across the street from their meeting place. A pair of thick black glasses completed my disguise, making me just another face in the crowd. As I sat there, butterflies churned in my stomach. I watched Mom stride into the cafe, a triumphant smile on her face. She spotted Silas at a secluded table, and her smile broadened. This was it, Operation Momzilla Takedown was officially underway. Silas, ever the tech-savvy hero, had discreetly started the recording device on his phone. I, from my hidden spot, could hear their conversation. It started off innocently enough, with Silas playing the part of the intrigued suitor. Then, oblivious to the recording, Mom launched into her tirade. "You know, Silas," she began, leaning in as if sharing a secret, "Ava just isn't wife material." My blood ran cold. This woman, who was supposed to be my mother, who was supposed to love and support me, was bad-mouthing me as if I were a stranger. "She's, well, a bit simple," Mom continued, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy, "and not very pretty either, if you know what I mean." Silas, to his credit, kept his face neutral, nodding and murmuring noncommittal responses. Inside, I knew he must be seething. "But Aurora," Mom's voice dropped to a whisper, as if confiding a great secret, "now there's a girl with potential. Smart, beautiful, knows how to handle herself in society." The audacity of it all. Aurora, with her superficial charm and complete lack of real ambition, was suddenly the epitome of elegance and intelligence, according to Mom. The conversation continued, each word from Mom's mouth further cementing her betrayal. Mom's mastery of manipulation and deceit reached a peak that day in the cafe. Blinded by her own delusions, she even confessed to never loving my stepfather, admitting she had married him just for his money. It was shameless. Finally, after what seemed like forever, she stood up, her face glowing with self-satisfaction. "Well, Silas, it was lovely meeting you. Think about what I said," she purred, patting his hand with her perfectly manicured nail as she left. Shaking my head in disbelief, I turned to Silas. "So, what now?" I asked, my voice tense. Silas pulled me into a comforting hug. "Now," he said firmly, "we expose her." The tension was palpable as I walked into my childhood home that weekend. Mom's smile was unnaturally wide, oozing smugness that grated on my nerves. "Ava, honey, you won't believe it," she gushed, the words tumbling out before I could even greet her. "What's that, Mom?" I braced myself. "Silas," she declared, her voice thick with sickening satisfaction, "decided to see reason. He's leaving you and marrying Aurora." My heart skipped, but I forced a smile. "That's great, Mom. Really happy for them." My stepdad, bless his perpetually confused soul, cleared his throat. "But I thought they were getting married." Aurora, lounging on the couch like a pampered cat, snorted. "Apparently not, Dad. Ava just wasn't good enough for him." I ignored her snide remark, my eyes locked on Mom's triumphant face. "Actually, Mom," I said, my voice steady, "Silas is right here." Just then, Silas walked in, a sly grin on his face. His entrance caused a collective gasp to echo through the room. "Hi, everyone," he greeted, his voice light. Just in time for a little family fun. He pulled out his phone and pressed play. The room fell silent as Mom's voice, dripping with malice, filled the air. The entire cafe conversation played out, her disparaging remarks about me, her praise for Aurora, and the shocking confession about my stepfather. As the recording continued, the color drained from Mom's face. My stepdad turned pale, his jaw slack with disbelief. Aurora's bravado crumbled, replaced by a whimper of terror. When the recording ended, a deathly silence hung in the air. Then, my stepfather exploded. "You lying snake," he roared, his voice shaking with fury. "You married me for money." For the first time, Mom seemed genuinely lost. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they were overshadowed by the storm of anger on my stepfather's face. "I want a divorce," he declared, his voice thick with resolve. "Get a lawyer." The room imploded. Mom and Aurora burst into tears, their wails creating a cacophony of misery and self-pity. Silas, bless his heart, looked as comfortable as a fish out of water, caught in the middle of a hurricane. Amidst the chaos, I felt an unexpected calm. The ugly, raw truth was finally out in the open. Years of unspoken hurt, manipulation, and lies had spilled out, shattering the facade of our dysfunctional family. In the following weeks, the household was a blur of my stepdad's choked sobs and Aurora's icy stares whenever our paths crossed. Mom, the architect of this whole mess, retreated into her own world of self-pity. Mom plunged into a self-imposed isolation from social media, and I, on the other hand, felt an odd emptiness. The anger that had driven me for so long had evaporated, leaving a void that seemed vast on a bright afternoon. I was on the couch, absent-mindedly thumbing through wedding magazines that now felt like relics of a forgotten era. "Hey," Silas said, his voice filled with concern as he noticed my mood. "You all right?" I managed a weak smile. "Yeah, just thinking. Everything just feels so different now." He squeezed onto the couch beside me and pulled me into a comforting hug. "It is different," he admitted, "but hey, different can be good. It's a chance to start fresh, you know." His words nudged me gently towards a new perspective. Perhaps he was right. Maybe this void left by my mom's chaos could be filled with something new and exciting. A spark of mischief lit up within me. "So," I said, a mischievous glint in my eyes, "what do you say we do something crazy?" Silas's eyebrows rose. "Crazy like what? How about a road trip?" I suggested, a grin spreading across my face. "Just us, a map, and the open road. No expectations, no timelines, just pure adventure." "You had me at road trip," he declared. And so, our plans took an unexpected turn. The meticulously planned vineyard ceremony transformed into a spontaneous cross-country adventure. We packed a beat-up camper van with essentials, copious snacks, a killer playlist, and a well-worn copy of On the Road, and set off with no particular destination in mind, only the promise of new experiences and shared memories. Fast forward a year, and Silas and I were standing at the altar, exchanging vows under a canopy of fragrant flowers. It wasn't the elaborate ceremony I'd once imagined, but it was perfect. Instead of a disapproving mother, my stepdad, recently divorced and estranged from Aurora, walked me down the aisle. The tears in his eyes were a mix of pride and regret. As he squeezed my hand, he whispered, "You know, kiddo, I always knew you'd find your happily ever after." Life after the wedding settled into a comfortable rhythm. Silas and I built a life together filled with laughter, love, and the occasional road trip adventure. My stepdad became a regular visitor, sharing stories from his travels and dropping not-so-subtle hints about wanting to be a grandpa. With a laugh, I'd reply, "Don't worry, you'll be the best grandpa ever." Eliona angrily declared that I needed to leave, catching me completely off guard with her sudden outburst. As she spoke, she emphasized that the house was registered in her father's name, and as his legitimate daughter, she claimed the rightful ownership and demanded I vacate. Stunned by her audacity, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Taking a moment, I paused dramatically, piquing Eliona's interest. She watched me intently, waiting for what I would say next. Amidst this tense moment, I directed the movers to temporarily place all items in an unused room, given that there wasn't much to relocate. Eliona attempted to intervene, but I blocked her path, firmly stating that the house was legally mine, and as we were essentially strangers, she had no right to enter without permission. This confrontation turned Eliona's face a vivid shade of red, and she stormed off after shouting in frustration. After her father, Aidan, passed away, I felt a deep-seated anger towards being treated so dismissively. Now, the situation had reversed, and I was determined to make her regret her actions. I am Madison, a 35-year-old college teacher. My late husband, Aidan, was in business 9 years my senior. Our relationship blossomed slowly after meeting through work, and when we discussed marriage, Aidan revealed his past marriage and a daughter named Eliona. His ex-wife had been unfaithful and accumulated debts for her lover, eventually losing custody of Eliana. Despite being raised in a single-parent home, Eliana lacked for nothing due to Aiden's successful business. However, as Aiden's financial situation improved, Eliana's demands grew more excessive. She yearned for high-end cosmetics and hair treatments, often disregarding any advice given to her. Raised with indulgence, Eliana was openly hostile towards me when we first met during her high school years. She refused to see me as a stepmother, proclaiming she already had a beautiful mother and a generous father. Aiden chose not to disclose his ex-wife's betrayal to Eliana, who continued to idolize her mother. Although this didn't bother me initially, Eliana's acceptance of me never materialized. After she turned 19, graduated, and started working, I hoped she had matured into a responsible adult. However, Aiden and I decided against having children of our own, concerned about Eliana's potential reaction to a half-sibling, given her volatile nature, and my own reservations about motherhood at my age. Eliana's antagonistic attitude and the prospect of dealing with a similarly difficult child of our own made us both certain that we couldn't handle parenting. Therefore, we agreed not to have children and to enjoy our lives together as a couple. This decision shaped our relationship and led to our marriage. 3 years after Eliana turned 19 and began working, Aiden and I married and settled into a routine life. However, our peaceful existence was shattered within those 3 years when Aiden was diagnosed with terminal cancer, leaving us with only palliative care as an option. The shock of the diagnosis was overwhelming, and I found myself in a daze, unable to grasp the reality of the situation. Soon, Aiden was hospitalized and began treatment. During this time, the emptiness of our home weighed heavily on me, and I struggled with loneliness. Amidst this, Eliana reappeared, adding tension to an already difficult time. Though technically my stepdaughter, Eliana and I had never lived together, and I didn't feel a strong familial bond. Eliana knew about Aiden's cancer and his hospitalization. She approached me with a smirk, announcing her decision to move nearby to take care of us. She insinuated that Aiden would prefer his real daughter over his new wife. After she left, I immediately contacted Aiden and relayed the conversation. He was apologetic, regretting that he had reached out to Eliana, thinking she had matured. He urged me not to worry him with these issues, so I reassured him cheerfully, though I doubted my ability to manage the situation. Dealing with Eliana's hostility was daunting, especially given our nearly 22-year age difference. At 35, I questioned how well I could understand Eliana, a 22-year-old, considering we weren't related by blood. These thoughts haunted me, and I struggled to find sleep, deciding instead to focus on my work and supporting Aiden. In the months that followed, my students and their parents began expressing concern for my well-being. Half a year passed without major changes in my work life, while Aiden continued to fight his illness bravely. Yet, the concern of Eliana's nearby presence lingered, a constant reminder of the unresolved tensions. Despite having lost over 15 pounds recently, I found myself cradling baby Stella in my arms, bewildered by the situation. Stella is Eliana's daughter, making me her step-grandmother, a role that Eliana exploits by frequently leaving Stella in my care. 10 months ago, Eliana, true to her promise, moved nearby. I had thought she was alone, but she brought Stella along, revealing her new status as a mother. Eliana's journey into motherhood began unexpectedly. After finishing high school, she fell for a man she met at a nightclub, spending most of her earnings on him. Unfortunately, the relationship was one-sided, and Eliana ended up pregnant and without a job. Her reaction was to cause a scene at the nightclub, resulting in a settlement and regular child support payments. Her decision to keep Stella seemed influenced by financial reasons. A few months into motherhood, Eliana learned of her father Aiden's serious illness. Seeing an opportunity, she hoped to endear herself to him to secure a portion of his inheritance. I overheard her discussing this plan on the phone, confirming her intentions were purely financial. As Aiden's wife, I was entitled to half of his estate, a fact that surely irritated Eliana. She even explored how I might relinquish my inheritance rights. Keeping Aiden in the dark about this conversation felt necessary, as he was bravely fighting his illness. Meanwhile, Eliana's demands on me grew. Initially, it was simple requests like watching Stella while she ran errands. However, these demands escalated to more frequent babysitting, aligning with visits to her father or supposed calls from Stella's father. All this while, there was no offer of compensation. As much as I found Stella adorable and enjoyed a growing attachment to her, the financial and emotional strain began to mount. Eliana's trips with friends and the occasional request to watch Stella for days added to my responsibilities. I covered all of Stella's expenses out of my own pocket, avoiding dipping into the funds set aside for Aiden's treatment. Though I had never wanted children of my own, caring for Stella stirred feelings I hadn't expected. Yet, I couldn't shake the frustration of being used by Eliana only when convenient. Stella was innocent in all this, and I did my best for her within my limits. But I was nearing my breaking point. I planned to confront Eliana about her responsibilities as soon as she returned from her trip. However, just as Eliana left, a call from the hospital sent me rushing there, fearing the worst about Aiden. The hospital was a flurry of activity, indicating Aiden's condition was critical. Amidst the chaos, little Stella began to cry, sensing the tension, but the nurses reassured me, allowing me to focus on Aiden's urgent situation. Aiden had slipped into unconsciousness, and it wasn't long before he passed away. His expression was peaceful in those final moments. It's often said that hearing is the last sense to fade, so perhaps the sound of Stella's cries and my voice brought him some comfort as he departed. This thought overwhelmed me, and I couldn't hold back my tears. The wake and funeral ceremonies went smoothly, although Eliana was conspicuously absent. I had informed her of Aiden's passing immediately, but her response was shocking and cold. "Oh really? But I've extended my trip, so I can't come back right away. Just handle everything as the surviving spouse. Nobody will complain, and legally you're his wife, so take care of the rest, and take care of Stella too." She hung up before I could respond. I was seething with frustration, but restrained myself for Stella's sake. When Aiden's relatives inquired about Eliana, I offered a plausible excuse to avoid stirring up any trouble. Eliana didn't even show up for the burial, which left me heartbroken, with only Stella providing some solace. Eliana vanished for 1 week following Aiden's death, ignoring all my attempts to reach her. Then, unexpectedly, the doorbell rang one day. I opened it to find several large men who identified themselves as movers. Behind them stood Eliana, wearing a smug smile. "Parasites from others need to get out," she blurted out, disregarding my astonishment. She announced that she had given up her apartment and would be moving in, claiming the house as her right since it was in her father's name. I was momentarily shocked, but quickly burst into laughter, which must have seemed like fear to her. As Eliana tried to push past in the confusion, I blocked her. "Do you think it's okay to enter someone's house without permission? This house is in my name. We are technically strangers, and you've never acknowledged me as your mother, so don't pretend now." My firm tone took her aback. "Since your trip is over, it's time you took responsibility for Stella," I continued. Eliana, furious, shouted, "I don't care," and stormed off, leaving Stella behind. As the movers lingered in confusion, I was filled with indignation over Eliana's attempt to move in and insult me so soon after Aiden's death. I resolved then to stand up for myself. Eventually, Eliana left her belongings in my house and disappeared without a trace. The whereabouts of her new residence remained unknown, and she seemed to have no fixed address. Despite the chaos, life with Stella stabilized. She was familiar with my face since infancy and had grown very attached. I had milk, diapers, and advice from friends with childcare experience. Accepting the situation, I resolved to ensure Stella's well-being until things were resolved. Then, 1 month after her disappearance, Eliana suddenly reappeared, this time with a police officer named Julian and a placement specialist named Logan. She accused me of kidnapping Stella, demanding that Julian arrest me and Logan intervene. I was shocked, but Julian listened to my side calmly. Julian seemed slightly incredulous, likely realizing that Eliana's accusations were driven by spite. Despite Logan's efforts to diffuse her anger, Eliana was beyond reasoning. In the midst of this, I firmly stated, "You were the one who left Stella with me. Everyone in the neighborhood knows it, including Aiden's relatives. You can't deny that, especially after you disappeared that day. And calling the police on me. That might just be considered obstruction of justice." Julian nodded, indicating his agreement, though technically it might be more accurate to call it filing a false report. Eliana had indeed filed a complaint to penalize me, but I doubted she grasped the legal nuances, so I simply accused her of lying and obstructing police duties. Hearing the term obstruction of justice seemed to unsettle her, showing the impact of those words. I continued, addressing Logan, "A mother who dumps her infant to go on a trip or pulls stunts like this is the real problem, don't you think?" It appeared that Eliana finally understood the gravity of the situation. Reluctantly, she muttered, "Fine, I'll let it go this time," but her audacity was glaring. Julian suggested they continue their discussion at the station, a standard procedure after such a serious complaint had been revealed to be a sham. Under added pressure from Logan, Eliana began to panic. "I'm not to blame. It's all her fault," she continued to spout nonsense, but Julian and his colleagues soon left, greeting me politely. A younger officer later conducted a brief inquiry, but the overwhelming support from witnesses quickly established my innocence. I was deeply grateful for everyone's support, especially considering the shock of police involvement, but they didn't hesitate to defend me. Eliana was not prosecuted, but received a stern warning. After the police's caution, she became dejected and vanished for about 5 months. During this time, the matter of Aiden's estate inheritance became pressing. As Eliana is his biological child, she is technically an heir, so I needed to contact her. Despite my efforts, including hiring a private investigator and sending certified mail through a lawyer, Eliana continued to ignore all attempts to reach her. We marked the first anniversary of Aiden's death around the same time I received an email from Eliana simply stating, "Stop bothering me. I want nothing to do with this." Consequently, I went to family court to file for estate division mediation. However, since Eliana wouldn't respond, the mediation failed to proceed, and ultimately the court had to conduct an estate division trial. Despite her previous indifference, Eliana showed up at my door, complaining about the outcome. "How can I, his own daughter, not inherit a single penny? This is absurd," she exclaimed, wanting the inheritance without any hassle. Her audacity was astounding, but I calmly presented her with the truth. "Do you know when the inheritance proceedings began?" I asked. Eliana confidently replied that it was the day the results came from the family court. I laughed and said, "No, that's not it. You knew about your father's death on that very day, so the date of inheritance commencement goes back more than a year." I decided to explain in simpler terms so Eliana could understand. She claimed it was unfair she wasn't receiving her rightful share, but the family court had calmly judged based on Aiden's will and the circumstances at the time. Firstly, Aiden's will explicitly state he didn't want to give Eliana even a single penny, and wished for me to inherit everything. Normally, Eliana would be entitled to at least half of what she could inherit, but despite my efforts to reach her through certified mail, consultations, and court interventions, Eliana remained silent. Moreover, the decisive factor came when Aiden had explicitly stated in his will that if Eliana abandoned the inheritance discussions, he did not want her to have any share at all, effectively leaving the entire estate to me. The fact that I was taking care of Stella, a relative by marriage, also significantly influenced the court's decision. Upon hearing this, Eliana retorted, "I took care of a lot when Dad was hospitalized. You just took Stella from me and stayed at home. I contributed to Dad, so this is unfair." But I countered her claims firmly, still lying at this stage. After I entrusted Stella to you, you went out, didn't you? I couldn't trust you to take care of Aiden. So when I called after leaving Stella with you, you weren't there as expected. That's why I ended up taking Stella for clothes changes and such. There's evidence, since visitors need to sign in when entering the ward, right? Keeping photos of the visitor logs, which included time and date, proved useful. This evidence was one of the reasons why the family court ruled in my favor for the full inheritance. Eliana, grinding her teeth in frustration, still tried to find a loophole, asserting, "Fine then, I'll sue for infringing on my rightful share." But as more than a year had passed since the inheritance began, her right had already expired. Upon hearing this, Eliana exclaimed in disbelief, "That's a lie, that's cheating. How come I, his own daughter, don't receive a penny of Dad's inheritance?" and began to panic. Eventually, Eliana slumped in defeat. So, I asked her about Stella. She replied, "I can't even take care of myself, let alone a child," and irresponsibly fled. How absurd, I thought. And yet, a few days later, Eliana made her last stand. "I want Stella back because she's my child." Despite her previous refusals, her change of heart was indeed puzzling. Eliana looked triumphant, but I remained calm. "Since that trip, you haven't taken Stella back to care for her at all. Don't you have any thoughts on this?" Eliana retorted, "You wanted to take care of her, not me. I asked Eliana again, for over a year, you let me take care of your child while you were receiving child support payments, didn't you?" Eliana looked puzzled for a moment but then laughed, saying, "A mother has the right to receive that, so what's the problem?" Hearing this, I smirked. Surprised by my sudden change in attitude, Eliana asked, "What's that supposed to mean?" I informed her, "That means you were receiving child support payments without properly taking care of your child. If this gets out, you'll be subject to penalties and might have to repay, given that you've caused trouble for the police with your fabrications before. I don't think this will just slide." Eliana's face turned serious. Little did she know, I had recorded our entire conversation, set to automatically save to the cloud, so even if Eliana destroyed anything, it wouldn't matter. This could lead to charges of property damage, and either way, Eliana would end up in the care of the police. Finally understanding the gravity of the situation, Eliana looked as if she was about to cry and said, "You didn't say that, did you?" perhaps wondering whether I had reported this to the authorities. "Of course, I reported it," I replied. Eliana's face turned even paler, and she began trembling with her hands over her mouth. "No way, it's not a lie. They said they'd investigate." I offered to provide any evidence I might have. This conversation would also be submitted as evidence. Hearing this, Eliana collapsed on the spot, apparently out of energy to retaliate. She could only mutter complaints that I couldn't hear, marking the end of our confrontation. When Eliana collapsed, overcome by the reality of her situation, I disclosed further, "Since I hired a professional to find your whereabouts and sent certified mail, I know about the boyfriend you're relying on for financial support. You moved in with him after leaving your apartment, pretending everything was fine, right?" Eliana looked up at me, her expression somber. I continued, "It's not just about not raising your child. When someone else is covering living expenses, receiving child support payments can be considered fraudulent." Eliana had opportunistically moved nearby after getting a call from Stella's father, pushing her responsibilities onto me. She had fooled around, acquired a boyfriend, left her apartment, and even tried to claim my house, which was already in my name due to a lifetime gift. That didn't work out, and she likely concocted a story to move in with her boyfriend. Seeing Eliana's face, it seemed all my speculations were accurate. Then, in what appeared to be her last stand, she declared, "It's fine. I've realized I need Stella to receive the child support payments, so give her back now. It annoys me how happy you seem to be with her, so I've come all this way to take her back." Her reasoning was painfully childish and driven by financial motives. A surge of anger rose in me towards Eliana, who saw her child merely as a means to an end. Yet, I maintained a calm demeanor and replied, "Sure, but shouldn't that conversation happen after discussing it with Stella's father?" Ignoring Eliana's confused look, I turned towards the living room and called out, "Wyatt, could I have a moment?" Startled by the familiar name, Eliana tried to flee, but found herself too weak to move. Soon, footsteps approached, and a man appeared, his face lighting up at the sight of Stella. His name was Wyatt, Eliana's ex-husband and Stella's biological father. I had heard from Eliana that Stella's father had left due to his irresponsibility, but I doubted such a man would consistently pay alimony and child support. Suspecting something was off, I had a detective investigate during the inheritance case. It turned out Wyatt was a regular employee, with no past of working at a nightclub. Taking a bold step, I reached out to him, mentioning Stella's name, and he eagerly agreed to meet. When Wyatt first saw Stella, he was moved to tears. "I've finally been able to meet my daughter. I was so happy when you contacted me." He explained that their divorce was due to Eliana's affair, but she had used her position as the mother to gain custody of Stella, leaving him to pay a minimal amount of child support. His gaze, while holding Stella's small hand, was filled with genuine paternal love. This reaffirmed my belief that only parents who truly love and care for Stella should raise her. Therefore, I consulted child welfare services and administration about this situation numerous times. Although Eliana technically had custody, her actions over the past year showed she hadn't been responsibly raising Stella. It's not the behavior of a loving mother to dump her child on someone she harbors hostility towards whenever convenient. As I continued to advocate for Stella, the staff at the administration began to sympathize with Wyatt's situation. My efforts weren't solely focused on the inheritance. I had been actively working to return Stella to where she truly belongs. In handling the inheritance, I was prepared to do whatever was necessary for Stella's well-being. Under the guidance of a lawyer, we prepared discreetly to help Wyatt regain custody of Stella. Everything was strategically set in place, bolstering Wyatt's case. At 32, up for a promotion to section chief, Wyatt had no financial issues, and many could vouch for his character and his consistent contributions, both financially and as a father. Despite Eliana's neglect, Wyatt had maintained his child support payments and even covered Eliana's living expenses, proving his reliability and commitment. Eliana, on the other hand, had pushed her parental responsibilities onto me, seeing Stella more as an inconvenience to her romantic pursuits than as a daughter. Meanwhile, Wyatt had shown nothing but genuine concern, frequently checking on Stella's well-being after learning about Eliana's situation. Eliana's predicament worsened with her fraudulent receipt of child support payments and issues involving her current boyfriend, who was working at a nightclub. "Isn't there another man supporting you financially? You're drowning in debt because of your spending on them," I confronted her. The financial supporter had realized Eliana's double dealings and left, and her nightclub boyfriend was on the verge of leaving her, recognizing he couldn't extract more money. Delivering the final blow, I made it clear, "Wyatt will make a much better and loving father than you." Overwhelmed, Eliana broke down, loudly apologizing, but her apologies fell on deaf ears. After some time, with the aid of friends, lawyers, and other supporters, the custody battle concluded, resulting in Wyatt gaining custody of Stella. My acquaintances, including the parents of my students and Aiden's relatives, expressed concerns about handing Stella over to Wyatt just because he was her biological father, especially given all I had endured. However, I knew it was right to prioritize a loving father for Stella. Eliana's life spiraled downwards after her arrest for fraudulently receiving child support without properly caring for Stella. Despite her efforts to maintain her facade, she was caught and eventually received a suspended sentence. The evidence and testimonies against her in the custody battle left her in despair. She lost everything: Stella, her boyfriends, her financial support, and even her savings and reputation. Working as a temp with a poor work attitude, she was soon laid off, became homeless, and struggled to find even part-time work due to her lack of qualifications. This was truly karma at work. As for me, I continued to live modestly, not using Aiden's inheritance. I believed Aiden wanted his granddaughter to benefit from his wealth, but feared the implications of explicitly including her in his will. On special occasions, I ensured Wyatt received a gift from the inheritance for Stella's benefit. Recently, Wyatt moved closer and unexpectedly confessed his feelings during one of his visits with Stella. "I've fallen in love with you, Madison. I didn't say anything before because it was a difficult time. Stella is attached to you, she sees you as her mother. I know it's disrespectful to you as a widow and to Aiden, but please, would you become a part of our family?" This proposal left me considering the deep emotions involved. Aiden's will revealed his final wishes separately from the inheritance details. "After I'm gone, if you find someone who loves you, please be happy with him. Your happiness is my happiness." These words, coming from a man usually reserved, underscored his deep affection and care for my well-being. Now, as I prepare to attend Stella's elementary school entrance ceremony, I reflect on these developments, realizing how intertwined our lives have become, guided by Aiden's enduring love and wisdom.